Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I still run through the events in my head, try to find the turning point, the moment where innocent flirting devolved into something else. It all started, as these things often do, with a swipe. Her profile was simple: a few filtered photos, a short bio about loving travel and good coffee. Nothing extraordinary, but there was something about her eyes in the main photo that drew me in. They were the kind of eyes that looked like they held 1,000 stories. We matched, and the initial conversation was lighthearted. Standard Tinder banter about our favorite travel destinations and what we were looking for on the app. Her name was Sarah, and she seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We exchanged numbers after a few days of chatting, and the texts quickly became more frequent and personal. She told me about her dreams of opening a small bookstore cafe, her anxieties about her family, and her past relationships. I shared my own stories, feeling a connection that I hadn't experienced with anyone in a long time. After a week of intense texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested a small, cozy bar in my neighborhood. I arrived early, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. When she walked in, she was even more beautiful than her photos. The way she smiled when she saw me eased all my worries. We spent the evening talking for hours, laughing and sharing stories. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I felt like I had known her for years. At the end of the night, we kissed goodnight, and I walked home with a sense of hope and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. We continued to see each other regularly over the next few weeks. We went on dates, cooked dinners at my apartment, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. I was falling hard for her, and it seemed like she felt the same way. She was smart, funny, and kind, and I loved spending time with her. But as time went on, I started noticing some oddities. She was secretive about her past. When I asked about her family or her previous relationships, she would become evasive, changing the subject or offering vague answers. She was also incredibly possessive. She wanted to know where I was at all times and who I was with. If I didn't respond to her text immediately, she would get anxious and bombard me with messages. At first, I brushed it off as her being passionate and caring, but it gradually started to feel suffocating. There was one incident that I can't shake from my mind, which should have been a red flag. But I was so blinded by infatuation that I didn't see it for what it was. I had plans to grab drinks with some old friends from college. I told Sarah about it a few days in advance, and she seemed fine with it. But on the night of the get-together, she started texting me incessantly. She wanted to know every detail of my evening. Who was there, what we were talking about, how much I had to drink. I tried to reassure her that it was just a casual hangout with friends, but she wouldn't let up. At one point, she even called me, demanding to know why I wasn't paying attention to her. I ended up cutting the evening short, feeling guilty and uncomfortable. When I got back to my apartment, Sarah was waiting for me outside. She looked furious. She accused me of lying to her and of being interested in one of my friends. I tried to explain that she was overreacting, but she wouldn't listen. The argument escalated, and she eventually stormed off, yelling that she couldn't trust me. I was shaken by her reaction. I couldn't understand why she was being so irrational. I tried to talk to her about it the next day, but she refused to apologize. She insisted that I had given her a reason to be suspicious and that I needed to earn back her trust. I felt like I was walking on eggshells around her, constantly trying to prove my loyalty. The possessiveness and secrecy continued to escalate. She started going through my phone when I wasn't looking and questioning me about every female contact I had. She also refused to introduce me to her friends or family, claiming that she wasn't ready yet. The more I tried to understand her, the more she pushed me away. I started feeling trapped and isolated. The woman I had fallen in love with seemed to be disappearing, replaced by someone I barely recognized. One evening, I decided to do some digging. I knew it was wrong, but I needed to know what she was hiding. I waited until she fell asleep, and then quietly took her phone. I started scrolling through her messages, and what I found shocked me to my core. She had been leading a double life. She was talking to multiple other men on Tinder, sending them the same sweet messages and making the same promises she had made to me. She was also exchanging explicit photos and videos with them. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The betrayal was overwhelming. I spent hours scrolling through her messages, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I discovered that she had a history of cheating and manipulation. She had left a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives in her wake. I was just another victim in her twisted game. I woke her up and confronted her with what I had found. She didn't deny anything. She simply shrugged and said that I should have known better than to trust her. She said that love was a game, and I had lost. I was devastated and heartbroken. I told her to get out of my apartment and never contact me again. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process what had happened. I felt like I had been living in a dream, and now I had woken up to a nightmare. I deleted her number, blocked her on social media, and tried to erase her from my life. But the memories still haunt me. I still think about her eyes and the way she smiled when we first met. I still wonder how someone could be so cruel and manipulative. The experience has changed me. I'm more cautious and guarded now. I find it hard to trust people, especially on dating apps. I still use Tinder occasionally, but I'm always on the lookout for red flags. I'm determined not to let myself be fooled again. I know that not everyone on Tinder is like Sarah. There are good people out, they're looking for genuine connections. But my experience has taught me that it's important to be careful and to protect myself. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, to understand why she did what she did. I may never have all the answers, but I'm determined to move on and to find someone who is worthy of my trust and love. It feels like a dream and nightmare put together. I question myself if I even fell in love with her. Maybe it was all just a mind game. I still find myself thinking about her. I used to think Tinder horror stories were all made up. Exaggerated tales spun for internet points or cautionary tales shared to scare young singles into celibacy. Until it happened to me. It wasn't some dramatic kidnapping or a gory murder mystery, but it was deeply unsettling, a slow burn of creeping dread that made me question my judgment and my safety. I'd been on Tinder for a couple of years, mostly out of boredom and a vague hope for something interesting. I wasn't looking for the one, just someone to grab a drink with, maybe see a movie. The usual. I swiped through the endless parade of gym selfies, awkward bathroom mirror shots, and guys holding fish until I stumbled upon his profile. Let's call him Ethan. Ethan was different. His pictures were candid, showing him hiking in the mountains, reading in a coffee shop, and laughing with friends. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he had a kind face and a genuine smile. His bio was witty and self-deprecating, making him seem approachable and down-to-earth. We matched, and I messaged him first, complimenting him on his hiking photo. He responded quickly, and we fell into an easy conversation about our favorite trails and books. He was articulate, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We chatted for a couple of weeks, and the connection felt real. He wasn't pushy or aggressive, just friendly and engaging. We eventually exchanged numbers and moved our conversations to text. The texts were just as good as the messages on Tinder. He'd ask about my day, share funny anecdotes, and even send me links to articles he thought I'd find interesting. I started to look forward to his messages, feeling a genuine sense of excitement whenever my phone buzzed. After a few weeks, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. Meeting someone from Tinder always felt like a gamble, but Ethan seemed different. He seemed safe. I agreed, and we set a date for the following Saturday at a local cafe. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the aroma of coffee and the chatter of customers. I scanned the crowd, feeling a nervous flutter in my stomach. Then I saw him. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even a little bit better in person. He had a warm smile and kind eyes, just like I imagined. We hugged, and the hug felt surprisingly natural. We ordered our coffees and settled into a cozy corner table. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about our jobs, our families, our hobbies. He was attentive, making eye contact and actively listening to what I had to say. He even remembered details from our previous conversations, which made me feel like he truly cared about getting to know me. The date lasted for a couple of hours, and by the end, I was smitten. He was everything I hoped for and more. As we walked out of the cafe, he asked if I wanted to go for a walk in the park. I happily agreed. The park was beautiful, filled with lush green trees and colorful flowers. We strolled along the winding paths, talking and laughing. He even held my hand, and it felt surprisingly comfortable. As we walked deeper into the park, the crowds thinned out, and we found ourselves alone in a secluded area. He stopped, turned to me, and looked into my eyes. "I had a really great time today," he said, his voice soft. "Me too," I replied, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. He leaned in and kissed me. The kiss was gentle and sweet, and it left me wanting more. We kissed for a few minutes, and then he pulled away. "I should probably get going," he said, his expression suddenly distant. "Okay," I said, feeling a pang of disappointment. We walked back to the entrance of the park in silence. He hugged me goodbye, and then he turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment, watching him go, feeling a mix of happiness and confusion. The date had been perfect, but his abrupt departure felt strange. I brushed it off, telling myself he probably just had something important to do. I went home, replaying the date in my head, feeling giddy with excitement. I couldn't wait to see him again. The next day, I texted him, thanking him for the wonderful date. He didn't respond. I waited a few hours and texted him again, asking if he was free to hang out sometime during the week. Still no response. I started to feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Had I done something wrong? Was he no longer interested? I checked my Tinder profile, wondering if I had accidentally unmatched him. To my surprise, he was still there, still matched with me. I texted him again, a little more urgently this time, asking if everything was okay. Still nothing. Days turned into weeks, and I never heard from him again. He vanished without a trace. I was devastated and confused. I couldn't understand why he would ghost me after such a perfect date. I replayed every moment in my head, searching for some clue, some sign that I had missed. But there was nothing. Everything had seemed so genuine, so real. I confided in my friends, telling them about the bizarre situation. They tried to comfort me, telling me that he was probably just a jerk or that he had met someone else. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was going on. I started to do some digging. I searched for him on social media, but he had no presence on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. It was as if he didn't exist outside of Tinder. I tried searching for his name online, but nothing came up. It was like he was a ghost. The more I searched, the more uneasy I became. I started to wonder if Ethan was even his real name. I decided to do a reverse image search on his Tinder photos. To my shock, the photos came up on several different websites, all associated with different names and locations. The photos were stock images, stolen from various sources online. Ethan wasn't who he said he was. He was a catfish. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had been completely duped. But why? What was his motive? Was he trying to scam me out of money? Was he trying to lure me into something dangerous? The possibilities swirled in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. I decided to report his profile to Tinder, hoping to prevent him from targeting other women. I also contacted the police, but they said there was nothing they could do since I hadn't been physically harmed. I was on my own. I spent the next few weeks in a state of heightened anxiety. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. I changed my phone number and deleted my social media accounts. I felt violated and vulnerable. Eventually, the fear subsided, but the unease remained. I never found out who Ethan really was or what he wanted, but the experience changed me. I became more cautious and skeptical of online dating. I learned that not everyone is who they seem to be, and that even the most charming and genuine people can be hiding something sinister. Now, when I hear Tinder horror stories, I don't dismiss them as exaggerated tales. I know firsthand that the dangers are real, and I know that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who hide behind a smile and a stolen photo. It made me realize how naive I was to believe that everyone on dating apps is genuine. It's a reminder that you can never truly know who is on the other side of the screen, no matter how well you think you know them. This experience has taught me to be more cautious, more vigilant, and to trust my instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore those red flags, no matter how much you want to believe in the person on the other side. My hope is that by sharing my story, I can help other people avoid similar situations. Online dating can be a fun and exciting way to meet new people, but it's important to remember that there are risks involved. Be careful, be smart, and always trust your gut. I'm usually not one for the whole trust your gut thing. I mean, gut feelings are nice and all, but I tend to overthink everything, analyze every possible angle, and logic my way through decisions. But man, Tinder Tinder taught me a brutal lesson about ignoring that little voice in the back of your head, the one that screams, "Something's not right." I downloaded Tinder during my last year of college. Everyone was doing it, and I figured, why not? I wasn't necessarily looking for anything serious, but I was open to meeting new people, maybe finding someone to grab a drink with on a Friday night. The usual college student Tinder experience that I matched with this guy, Liam. He was different. Not like in a bad way at first. He was artsy, a photographer, and his profile was full of cool black and white shots of cityscapes and random, interesting objects. His bio was short but intriguing, lost in the right direction. Corny, maybe, but it caught my attention that we started chatting, and he was super engaging. He didn't do the typical hey or WID. He asked about my major, my favorite books, what I wanted to do after graduation. He seemed genuinely interested, which was a refreshing change from the usual Tinder small talk. He was a bit intense, though. He would send long, thoughtful messages, sometimes multiple times a day. It was flattering at first, but then it started to feel overwhelming that my gut was telling me to slow things down, but my brain was like, he's just enthusiastic. He's different. Give him a chance. So, I ignored the gut that we talked for about a week before he suggested meeting up. He wanted to go to this obscure art gallery in a part of town I wasn't super familiar with. It felt a little weird, but I figured, hey, I'm adventurous. I'll try new things. Stupid. The day of the date, I was already feeling uneasy. I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. He was texting me constantly, asking what I was wearing, what time I was leaving, if I was excited. It was like he needed constant reassurance. I debated canceling, but again, my brain talked me out of it. You're being dramatic. He's just excited to meet you. Don't be rude. I should have been rude. I got to the gallery, and it was deserted, like completely empty. No staff, no other visitors, nothing. Red flag number 1,000,000. I texted Liam, "Hey, I'm here, but it's closed?" He replied instantly, "No, I'm here. Come around to the back entrance. It's a private showing." Private showing? For who? Just us. My gut was screaming, but I, in my infinite wisdom, decided to go around to the back, that I found the back entrance, a dingy, unmarked door. I hesitated, then texted a screenshot of my location to my best friend, Sarah, with the message, "If I'm not back in an hour, call the cops." Yeah, I was starting to get really nervous that I opened the door, and the inside was even creepier than I imagined. It was dimly lit, with exposed brick walls and strange, abstract sculptures scattered around. Liam was standing in the middle of the room, smiling. He looked different in person. His eyes were intense, too intense, and he was wearing this weird, oversized coat that seemed out of place for the weather. I tried to play it cool. "Hey, so, what's this private showing all about?" He just smiled wider and didn't answer. He started walking towards me, slowly, deliberately. I took a step back. "Liam, is everything okay?" He stopped a few feet away from me, still smiling. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you," he said, his voice low and almost predatory. "Okay, well, it's nice to meet you too," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, what kind of art do you like?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his eyes boring into mine. It was like he was trying to see inside my soul. Then, he reached into his coat pocket. My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't know what he was going to pull out, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. I turned to run, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. I tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Don't go," he said, his voice now a low growl. "I just want to show you something." I was terrified. I started screaming, kicking, trying to get away. He didn't let go. He dragged me further into the gallery, towards a back room that I was fighting with everything I had, but he was stronger than me. He pushed me into the back room, which was even darker and creepier than the main gallery. There were strange, unsettling paintings on the walls, and the air smelled musty and stale. He finally let go of my arm, and I stumbled back, gasping for breath. He pulled something out of his pocket. It wasn't a weapon, but it was almost worse. It was a camera. He raised the camera to his eye and started taking pictures of me. Not posed, artistic pictures. He was taking pictures of me while I was terrified, while I was crying, while I was fighting for my life. It was then that I realized what was going on. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was some kind of twisted, Sick fantasy. He was taking pictures of my fear that I don't know how. But I managed to find a surge of adrenaline. I saw a heavy metal sculpture nearby, and I grabbed it. I swung it as hard as I could. Hitting him in the head, he stumbled back, momentarily stunned. I didn't waste any time. I ran out of the back room, out of the gallery, out into the street. I didn't stop running until I was a block away, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face, that I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. She answered immediately. "I'm here. I'm safe. Call the cops." I waited for the police to arrive, shaking and sobbing. They took my statement, and they went to the gallery to investigate. They found Liam inside, unconscious but alive. They also found his camera, full of pictures of me. Terrified and vulnerable, he was arrested and charged with assault and unlawful imprisonment. It turned out he had a history of stalking and harassing women online. He had been using Tinder to lure victims into his twisted game. The aftermath was rough. I had nightmares for months. I couldn't sleep alone. I jumped at every shadow. I was diagnosed with PTSD that I went to therapy, and slowly, I started to heal. But I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget the feeling of being trapped, of being preyed upon, of being used for someone else's sick pleasure. And I'll definitely never forget the lesson I learned about trusting my gut. That little voice that told me something was wrong, it was right. It was trying to protect me. And I ignored it that I'm still on Tinder occasionally. I'm not going to let one bad experience ruin my life. But now I listen to my gut. If something feels off, I don't hesitate. I unmatch. I block. I walk away. Because sometimes that little voice is the only thing standing between you and a nightmare. And you should always trust it. I got lucky. Someone else might not be. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut. A lesson that was hammered home with a level of intensity one wouldn't wish on anyone. It all started, as so many questionable life choices do these days, with a swipe right. I'd been on Tinder for a while, bouncing between hopeful optimism and cynical boredom. Dating apps felt like a necessary evil in the modern world, a way to connect with people outside my usual circles. Most of my matches were fleeting conversations, a few awkward dates, and then nothing. But then came Liam. His profile was attractive, but not overly so. Natural photos, a witty bio about his love for bad puns and hiking, and a generally approachable vibe. We matched instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We bonded over our shared love of indie films and obscure music, and after a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date was great. Liam was just as charming in person as he was online. He had a disarming smile and a way of making me feel comfortable and at ease. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. I left the date feeling genuinely excited, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We started seeing each other regularly. We went on hikes, explored new restaurants, and even had a cozy movie night at my apartment. Liam was attentive and thoughtful, always remembering small details and making an effort to surprise me with little gestures. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I pushed that thought aside, attributing it to my own cynicism and past dating disappointments. About a month into the relationship, things started to shift, subtly at first. Liam became more possessive, wanting to know where I was and who I was with at all times. He started dropping by my apartment unannounced, claiming he just wanted to surprise me. He'd get jealous if I mentioned other male friends, even casually. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that he was just really into me. But the possessiveness escalated. He started subtly criticizing my clothes, my friends, even my career choices. He'd frame it as helpful advice, but it always left me feeling belittled and insecure. One evening, I was getting ready to go out with some girlfriends for a long-planned dinner. Liam came over, ostensibly to hang out. As I was putting on my makeup, he started questioning my outfit, telling me it was too revealing and that I'd attract the wrong kind of attention. "I just don't want other guys looking at you like that," he said, his voice laced with a strange mix of concern and anger. I tried to explain that I was just going out with my friends and that I wasn't trying to attract anyone. But he wouldn't let it go. He kept pressuring me to change, his voice growing louder and more insistent. Finally, I snapped. "Liam, stop it," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I'm going out with my friends, and I'm wearing what I want. You don't get to control me." His face darkened. I'm not trying to control you, he said, his voice dangerously low. I'm just trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I retorted. From having a good time with my friends? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a cold, unsettling intensity. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. I managed to get him to leave, but the incident left me shaken. I called my best friend, Sarah, and told her everything. She was immediately concerned. This guy sounds like a textbook manipulator, she said. You need to be careful. Trust your gut. I knew she was right. My gut had been screaming at me for weeks, but I had been ignoring it, blinded by the initial charm and excitement of the relationship. Sarah urged me to break up with him immediately, but I hesitated. I didn't want to hurt him, and I still held on to the hope that things could go back to how they were in the beginning. Big mistake. The next day, Liam called me repeatedly, apologizing profusely for his behavior. He promised he would never do it again, and that he was just insecure because he cared about me so much. I wanted to believe him, but the memory of his cold stare kept replaying in my mind. That evening, I decided to go for a run to clear my head. As I was running through the park near my apartment, I noticed Liam sitting on a bench, watching me. He hadn't mentioned coming to the park, and the look on his face was unsettling. It wasn't a friendly look. It was more like an observation. I sped up, trying to put distance between us. When I got back to my apartment, I found a note taped to my door. It was a picture of me running in the park, taken from a distance. Scrawled across the picture in black marker were the words, "I'm always watching." I felt a wave of terror wash over me. This wasn't just possessiveness anymore. This was stalking. This was dangerous. I called the police and showed them the note and the picture. They took it seriously and advised me to get a restraining order. I spent the next few hours at the police station, filling out paperwork and answering questions. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was late and I was exhausted. I decided to stay at Sarah's place for the night, feeling too scared to be alone. As I was packing an overnight bag, I heard a noise outside my window. I peeked through the curtains and saw Liam standing on the sidewalk, staring up at my apartment. He was holding a bouquet of flowers, but his expression was anything but romantic. He looked angry and desperate. I quickly called the police again. They arrived within minutes and arrested Liam. He didn't resist, but as they were leading him away, he looked at me and said, "You can't run away from me. I'll always find you." The restraining order was granted the next day. Liam was ordered to stay away from me and my apartment. I thought it was over, but the fear lingered. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional trauma of the experience. A few weeks later, I received a strange package in the mail. It was a box filled with newspaper clippings about missing women. Each clipping had a photo of the missing woman, circled in red. I recognized one of the women from Tinder. We had matched, but I never met her. I immediately called the police. They reopened Liam's case and started investigating him as a suspect in the disappearances. I don't know if he was responsible, but the package was enough to make me believe he was capable of anything. I moved to a new city a few months later, hoping to start fresh and leave the nightmare behind. I still think about Liam sometimes, and the fear still lingers. But I'm slowly learning to trust my gut again and to recognize the red flags early on. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut, a lesson that could have saved me from a lot of pain and fear. It's a lesson I'll never forget, and one I hope others can learn without having to go through a similar experience. Dating apps can be a great way to meet people, but it's important to be cautious and to listen to your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags. Protect yourself. Your safety and well-being are the most important things. Okay, so picture this. It's 2018. I'm fresh out of a long-term relationship, and my friends are all chanting the same mantra. Get on Tinder. It'll be fun. Rebound. Meet new people. It's a whole new world. I was hesitant. I'd always been a relationship kind of person, not really one for casual dating. But the loneliness was starting to creep in, and the thought of endless nights alone with Netflix and a tub of ice cream wasn't exactly appealing. So I caved. I created a profile, carefully selecting photos that made me look approachable and vaguely interesting. I wrote a bio that was witty but not trying too hard, hinting at my hobbies and interests without revealing too much. Swipe, swipe, swipe. It was surprisingly addictive. The ego boost of getting a match, the thrill of a promising conversation. It was all very validating. That's when I matched with Liam. He was good-looking, in that rugged, outdoorsy kind of way. His profile was filled with pictures of him hiking, camping, and kayaking. He seemed adventurous and genuine, not like the typical gym selfie and beer type you often find on Tinder. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. We had a lot in common: a love for nature, a passion for books, a similar sense of humor. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking thoughtful questions, and sharing details about his own life. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for a hike. It seemed like the perfect first date: low pressure, outdoors, a chance to actually talk and connect. I agreed, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The day of the hike arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I meticulously planned my outfit, wanting to look cute but also practical. I packed water and snacks, double-checked my phone battery, and texted my best friend my location and Liam's contact information, just in case. I wanted to feel safe in the situation. When I arrived at the trailhead, Liam was already there, waiting for me. He looked even better in person, tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. We exchanged greetings, and he gave me a quick hug that sent a shiver down my spine. He told me he knew the perfect secluded trail. The hike started off great. The weather was perfect, the scenery was beautiful, and Liam was engaging and funny. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and joking as we made our way up the mountain. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and I felt comfortable and at ease around him. As we hiked further into the woods, the trail became less crowded and more isolated. The trees grew taller. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a sense of peaceful solitude. We were deep in nature, so it seemed safe to just chat with a good view. That's when things started to change. Liam's demeanor shifted subtly. He became quieter, more intense. He started asking more personal questions, probing into my past relationships, my insecurities, my fears. I brushed it off at first, figuring he was just trying to get to know me better. But his questions became increasingly invasive, making me feel uncomfortable and exposed. Then he started talking about control. He talked about how people are inherently selfish and untrustworthy, how the only way to truly be happy is to take control of your own life and your own destiny. He spoke with a fervent intensity that made me uneasy, his eyes gleaming with a strange light. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept circling back to the theme of control, his voice growing louder and more agitated. I started to feel a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. The peaceful solitude of the woods suddenly felt oppressive, claustrophobic. I wanted to turn back, but I was afraid of what Liam might do. We reached a clearing with a stunning view of the valley below. I stopped to take a picture, hoping to create a distraction, but Liam grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't you see?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "We could have everything. We could be free. All you have to do is trust me." I tried to pull away, but he held on tighter. His eyes were wild, his face flushed. I realized then that I was in danger. I remembered a self-defense class I had taken years ago. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I shifted my weight, braced my legs, and kneed him in the groin as hard as I could. He gasped in pain and released my arm. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, scrambling down the trail as fast as I could. I could hear him behind me, yelling and cursing. I didn't look back. I just ran, my heart pounding, my lungs burning. I finally reached the trailhead, where I collapsed, gasping for air. I looked back, but Liam wasn't there. I didn't know if he had given up or if he was still coming after me. I pulled out my phone and called the police. They arrived quickly and took my statement. They searched the woods for Liam, but they couldn't find him. They told me he was probably just a harmless weirdo, but they took my concern seriously and promised to keep an eye out for him. I went home that day feeling shaken and traumatized. I couldn't believe that something like that had happened to me. I had been so careful, so cautious, but I had still put myself in danger. The police never found Liam. I was terrified that he would be after me. I barely slept. I deleted my Tinder profile, and I haven't used dating apps since. I am now scared to go on dates. What was supposed to be a fun and harmless way to meet new people turned into a terrifying and potentially life-threatening experience. I now prefer being single. The only person I can trust is myself. I learned a valuable lesson that day. You can never really know someone you meet online. People can create fake profiles, present themselves as something they're not, and hide their true intentions. It's important to be careful and trust your instincts, even if it means being rude or walking away from a seemingly promising connection. I still go hiking, but I never go alone. I always tell someone where I'm going and when I'll be back. I carry pepper spray and a whistle, and I'm always aware of my surroundings. I did start being a little more careful. The experience with Liam changed me. It made me more cautious, more guarded, more aware of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of the online world. I will never be as naive and trusting as I was before. The worst part is not knowing why he did it. Was it a game to him? Did he have a dark past that drove him? I will never know. I was lucky. I survived. But others might not be so fortunate. Be careful out there. This is my Tinder horror story, and it's completely true. I used to think these Tinder horror stories were totally made up, exaggerated for clicks, spun for drama, the online equivalent of campfire tales meant to scare naive newbies. Until it happened to me. I was fresh out of a long-term relationship, feeling adventurous and maybe a little reckless. My friends convinced me that Tinder was the way to go, a modern-day social experiment with the potential for fun dates and interesting connections. I swiped right with reckless abandon, fueled by the promise of a fresh start and the thrill of the unknown. That's how I matched with Alex. His profile was pretty standard, a few smiling pictures, a bio that mentioned hiking and craft beer. Nothing that screamed serial killer or catfish. We chatted for a few days, the conversation flowing easily. He seemed intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We both expressed a shared love for obscure movies and indie music, which only fueled my excitement. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small, independent cafe near my apartment. I felt a little flicker of anxiety, the usual jitters that come with meeting a stranger from the internet, but I brushed it aside. This was 2018. Everyone met online. What could possibly go wrong? When I arrived at the cafe, Alex was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He looked even better in person than in his photos, with a charming smile and warm eyes. He was taller than I expected, with a lean build and a kind of effortless cool that made me feel instantly at ease. The date started out perfectly. We talked for hours, jumping from topic to topic, laughing at each other's jokes. He was a great listener, asking thoughtful questions and making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We had so much in common that it felt almost surreal. As the cafe started to empty out, Alex suggested we move to a nearby bar for a drink. I hesitated for a moment, a small voice in the back of my mind warning me to be cautious. But I ignored it, telling myself that I was being paranoid. He seemed so genuine, so harmless. The bar was dimly lit and cozy, with a relaxed atmosphere. We ordered a couple of beers and continued our conversation, the alcohol loosening my inhibitions and making me feel even more comfortable. It was the kind of date that made you believe in instant connections, in finding someone who just gets you. But that's when things started to take a turn. Alex started asking more personal questions, probing into my past relationships and my deepest insecurities. At first, I didn't think much of it, chalking it up to him being interested in getting to know me better. But his questions became more and more invasive, pushing boundaries and making me feel increasingly uncomfortable. He asked about my family, my childhood, my dreams, my fears. He wanted to know everything, digging deeper and deeper into my psyche. I tried to deflect, changing the subject and making light of his inquiries, but he wouldn't let up. He kept pressing, his eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. I started to feel like I was being interrogated, like I was trapped in a spotlight with no escape. The charm that had initially drawn me in began to fade, replaced by a cold, unsettling feeling. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Then, he started talking about his past. He told me about his childhood, which he described as complicated. He spoke of abandonment, betrayal, and a deep-seated anger that he couldn't seem to shake. His voice was low and menacing, his eyes filled with a dark, unsettling rage. He talked about revenge, about getting even with those who had wronged him. He spoke of darkness, of a force within him that he couldn't control. He made me incredibly uncomfortable as his words carried a tone of a real, terrifying, disturbing undertone. I was terrified. I knew I had to get out of there. I made an excuse, telling him that I had an early morning and needed to get home. He didn't argue, But he didn't seem happy either. He offered to walk me home, but I refused, insisting that I could handle it myself. As I walked away from the bar, I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't feel safe until I was back in my apartment, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, replaying the date in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Alex wasn't who he seemed to be. There was something dark and dangerous lurking beneath his charming exterior. The next day, I did some online sleuthing. I searched for Alex's name on Google, hoping to find some answers. What I found sent chills down my spine. There were news articles about a string of unsolved disappearances in a nearby town. The victims were all young women, all around my age, and they had all been seen with a man who matched Alex's description. My blood ran cold. I realized that I had been on a date with a potential serial killer. I had narrowly escaped a fate that had befallen other women. I immediately contacted the police, sharing everything I knew about Alex. They took my statement seriously and launched an investigation. They were able to track down Alex based on the information I provided, and they brought him in for questioning. The investigation is still ongoing. Alex hasn't been charged with anything yet, but he is the prime suspect in the disappearances. The police are working tirelessly to gather evidence and build a case against him. I'm still haunted by what happened. I can't shake the feeling that I was almost a victim, that I came face to face with pure evil. I've deactivated my Tinder account and sworn off online dating for good. The risk is simply too great. I used to think these Tinder horror stories were made up, but now I know they're all too real. I learned the hard way that you can't always trust what you see online, and that sometimes the person behind the profile is not who they seem to be. The world is dangerous, so be careful who you open the door for. Now, I'm incredibly cautious about meeting new people. I trust my instincts more than ever, and I always make sure to have a safety plan in place. I share my location with friends, let them know who I'm meeting, and check in regularly. I also advocate for online safety and awareness. I share my story with others, hoping to educate them about the risks of online dating and the importance of taking precautions. My experience with Alex has changed me forever. It's made me more aware, more cautious, and more grateful for the simple things in life. I know that I'm lucky to be alive, and I'm determined to make the most of every day. So, if you're thinking about using Tinder or any other online dating app, please be careful. Do your research, trust your instincts, and always prioritize your safety. The world is full of wonderful people, but it's also full of darkness. Be vigilant, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of a gut feeling. It could save your life. Alright, so, you know how everyone has that one dating app horror story? Well, buckle up, because mine from Tinder is a doozy. And the messed up thing is, it didn't even start out like a horror story. It started out promising. Stupidly, naively promising. I'd been on Tinder for maybe a year at that point, just swiping casually, going on the occasional mediocre date. Nothing serious, nothing that stuck. I was mostly just bored, to be honest. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was different. Not like serial killer different, but thoughtfully different. He had pictures of him hiking, reading in a coffee shop, volunteering at an animal shelter. He wasn't shirtless in every photo, flexing his abs. He actually seemed like a real person with interests beyond getting laid. And his bio was witty, something about searching for someone to debate obscure movie trivia with. I was intrigued. We matched, and our conversation flowed easily. We talked about movies, books, music, our families, our dreams for the future. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. He wasn't just trying to get me into bed, which was a refreshing change of pace. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested this little independent bookstore cafe downtown, which immediately scored him points in my book. When I saw him waiting there, I was even more impressed. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even better in person. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and he was wearing this ridiculously soft-looking sweater. I was already halfway to falling for him. The date went incredibly well. We talked for hours, losing track of time. We debated the merits of different directors, shared embarrassing childhood stories, and discovered we had a surprising amount in common. There was a genuine connection there, a spark. At the end of the night, he walked me back to my car and gave me a lingering hug. I felt butterflies, which was something I hadn't felt in a long time. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went to movies, concerts, museums. We cooked dinner at each other's apartments. We spent hours just talking, laughing, and getting to know each other better. He was kind, considerate, and attentive. He listened when I talked, remembered the little things, and always made me feel special. I was falling hard, and I wasn't afraid to admit it. He seemed to feel the same way. We started talking about the future, about traveling together, about maybe even moving in together someday. It felt like everything was falling into place. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Then, about 3 months into the relationship, things started to get weird. It started small. He started being a little more possessive, a little more controlling. He'd get annoyed if I didn't respond to his texts immediately. He'd ask who I was talking to when I was on the phone. He'd get jealous if I spent time with my friends without him. At first, I brushed it off. I figured he was just insecure, maybe a little clingy. I tried to reassure him, to tell him that I loved him and that I wasn't going anywhere. But it didn't seem to help. His behavior kept escalating. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced. He'd say he was just in the neighborhood, or that he wanted to surprise me. But it felt intrusive, like he was trying to keep tabs on me. He started questioning my decisions, telling me what I should and shouldn't do. He'd criticize my clothes, my friends, my job. I started feeling suffocated. I felt like I was losing my independence, my sense of self. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd just get defensive, accusing me of not loving him enough or of trying to push him away. He'd say he was just trying to protect me, that he knew what was best for me. One night, I was out with my friends, celebrating a birthday. I told Liam I'd be home late, and he seemed okay with it. But when I got back to my apartment, he was waiting for me. He was sitting on my doorstep, in the dark, looking furious. He started yelling at me, accusing me of cheating on him. He said he knew I was lying about where I'd been and who I'd been with. He said I was a terrible person and that he couldn't believe he'd ever fallen for me. I was terrified. I'd never seen him like this before. He was like a completely different person. I tried to calm him down, to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. He just kept yelling and screaming, his face red with rage. Finally, I told him to leave. I said I couldn't do this anymore, that I couldn't be with someone who treated me like this. He looked shocked, like he couldn't believe what I was saying. Then his expression changed. He started crying, begging me to forgive him. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean any of the things he'd said. He said he loved me and that he couldn't live without me. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I knew I couldn't. I knew that if I stayed with him, things would only get worse. So, I stood my ground and told him to leave again. This time, he didn't argue. He just turned and walked away, his head hanging low. I locked the door behind him and burst into tears. I felt heartbroken, confused, and scared. I couldn't believe that the man I had fallen in love with had turned out to be someone so different, so controlling and abusive. The next few days were a blur. I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't answer my phone. I just stayed in bed, crying and trying to process what had happened. I was afraid that he would come back, that he would try to hurt me. Then, one morning, I woke up to a series of text messages from an unknown number. They were pictures. Pictures of me. Pictures of me inside my apartment, taken through my windows. Pictures of me sleeping, eating, and just going about my daily life. I was horrified. I realized that Liam had been stalking me, that he had been watching me the whole time. I called the police immediately, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof that he had actually threatened me. I felt helpless, vulnerable, and completely exposed. I knew I had to do something to protect myself, so I decided to move. I packed up all my belongings and moved to a different city, where Liam couldn't find me. It's been a few years since then, and I'm still recovering from the experience. I'm still scared, still paranoid, and still struggling to trust people. I haven't used Tinder since, and I don't think I ever will again. The worst part is that it all started so innocently. It started with a simple swipe right, a few friendly messages, and a connection that seemed too good to be true. But that's the thing about Tinder and dating apps in general. You never really know who you're talking to. You never really know what someone is capable of. You have to be careful. You have to be cautious. You have to trust your instincts. Because sometimes, the person on the other end of that screen is not who they appear to be. Sometimes, they're a monster in disguise, waiting to prey on your vulnerability and destroy your life. And that realization is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. It makes me sick to my stomach to think I gave him a chance. I considered giving him my life. I will never forgive myself for falling for a Tinder profile. I was freshly divorced, reeling, and convinced I needed to get back out there. Everyone told me Tinder was the way to go. Easy, casual, no pressure. Famous last words, right? I created a profile, swiped with reckless abandon, and within a day had a decent stream of matches. Most of them were the usual suspects: gym selfies, fish pics, and bios that read like they were written by a committee of brothers. But then there was Liam. Liam's profile was different. No shirtless pics, no boasting about his accomplishments. Just a few candid shots of him traveling, hiking, and reading. His bio was simple: looking for someone to explore the world with, and maybe talk about books. I swiped right without hesitation. We matched instantly. Our conversations were amazing, like something out of a movie. We talked about everything: our dreams, our fears, our favorite books, our most embarrassing childhood memories. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. I felt seen, heard, and understood in a way I hadn't in years. After a week of intense texting and late-night phone calls, we decided to meet. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe near my apartment. Perfect, right? I was giddy with excitement. I spent hours picking out the perfect outfit, agonizing over whether to wear my hair up or down. I wanted to make a good impression, not because I was necessarily looking for anything serious, but because I genuinely enjoyed his company and wanted to see where things could go. When I arrived at the cafe, Liam was already there, sitting at a table near the window, a book in his hands. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He stood up when he saw me, a warm smile on his face, and gave me a hug that felt right. The first hour of our date was perfect. We talked about books, of course, but also about our families, our jobs, and our travel experiences. He was charming, attentive, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. I was completely smitten. Then things started to get strange. He started asking me questions about my divorce. Not just the usual, "What happened?" kind of questions, but deep, probing questions about my ex-husband, our relationship, and the reasons for our split. He wanted to know everything: the good, the bad, and the ugly. I was a little uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to him being genuinely interested in getting to know me. I answered his questions honestly, trying to keep things light and positive. But he kept pushing, digging deeper and deeper into the details of my failed marriage. Then he started talking about my ex-husband in a way that made my skin crawl. He said things like, "He never deserved you, and I can't believe he let you go." It was flattering at first, but then it started to feel possessive, like he was claiming me as his own. He then proceeded to pull out my ex-husband's address, phone number, and place of work. He said he knew where my children went to school and their activities, and even knew what my dog's name was. I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't let me. He kept circling back to my ex-husband, his voice growing colder and more intense with each passing minute. I started to feel a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I know everything about him," he whispered, leaning closer to me. "Everything." I froze. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I tried to stand up, to leave, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice now a low, menacing growl. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. I looked around the cafe, hoping someone would notice my distress, but everyone seemed oblivious, lost in their own little worlds. "Let go of me," I said, my voice trembling. He just smiled, a chilling, unsettling smile that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm just trying to protect you," he said. "He hurt you. I won't let him hurt you again." I finally managed to wrench my arm free and stumbled backward, away from him. I didn't say anything. I just turned and ran, as fast as I could, out of the cafe and into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, gasping for breath. I felt like I had just escaped from a monster. I spent the rest of the day in a state of terrified paralysis. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even think straight. I kept replaying the events of the date in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. That night, I received a text message from Liam. It was a picture of my ex-husband's car, parked outside his house. The caption read, "Don't worry. I'm taking care of everything." I called the police immediately. The investigation revealed that Liam was not who he said he was. He was a professional stalker, hired by someone, they never found out who, to harass and intimidate me. He had been gathering information about me and my ex-husband for months, meticulously planning his every move. The police issued a restraining order against him, and he was eventually arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. I testified against him in court, and he was sentenced to several years in prison. But even now, years later, I still live in fear. I constantly look over my shoulder, wondering if he's watching me, waiting for his chance to strike again. I deleted all my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and moved to a different city. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his chilling smile and his possessive words. I'll never use Tinder again. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating. You never really know who you're talking to, who's behind a profile, who's lurking in the shadows. People can present themselves one way online and be completely different in reality. The internet can be a dangerous place, full of predators and stalkers and people who are not who they seem. You have to be careful, vigilant, and always trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, don't dismiss your instincts, and don't be afraid to walk away. Your safety and well-being are more important than anything else. And for God's sake, if someone starts asking too many questions about your ex-run, I used to think these Tinder horror stories were made up. Now I know better. I know that they're real, that they can happen to anyone, and that they can change your life forever. Now I just hope you never have to experience it firsthand. I never imagined I'd be telling this story. Not in a million years. I always saw myself as pretty level-headed, someone who made smart choices, especially when it came to online dating. Tinder was just a game, right? A way to kill time, maybe meet someone interesting. But it turned into something else entirely. Something that still makes me check my locks at night and second-guess every shadow. It started innocently enough. I was in a rut, working a dead-end job, and my social life had dwindled to Netflix and takeout. My best friend, Sarah, kept nagging me to get back on Tinder. "It's fun," she'd say. "Just swipe and see what happens." So, one bored Sunday afternoon, I caved. I updated my profile with some recent pictures, wrote a witty bio, and dove in. The usual suspects appeared: gym selfies, fish pictures, guys holding puppies. I swiped left on most of them, occasionally right if someone seemed genuinely interesting. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. No cheesy cliches, no posed photos. Just a few candid shots of him traveling, hiking, and one where he was laughing with friends at a bonfire. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and his bio was simple: explorer, reader, seeker of good stories. We matched instantly. I messaged him, expecting the usual awkward small talk, but he surprised me. He asked about my favorite book, my dream travel destination, and what I was passionate about. It felt like an actual conversation, not just a series of canned lines. We chatted for a week before deciding to meet. He suggested a local coffee shop, nothing fancy. I was nervous, but also excited. He seemed genuine, intelligent, and attractive. The date went well, surprisingly well. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was even more charming in person, with a quick wit and a genuine interest in what I had to say. He walked me home, and we shared a goodnight kiss at my doorstep. It felt like something real could actually come of this. We started seeing each other regularly, hiking on weekends, exploring new restaurants, going to concerts. He was adventurous, spontaneous, and made me feel alive again. He told me about his travels through Southeast Asia, his passion for photography, and his dream of opening a bookstore. I shared my own aspirations, my fears, and my secret love for bad reality TV. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Looking back, there were little things that should have raised red flags, but I was too caught up in the whirlwind of romance to notice. He was evasive about his past, never talking about his family or previous relationships. He was intensely private, always changing the subject if I asked about his job or where he lived. He always paid in cash, never using a credit card, but I brushed it all aside. He was just a free spirit, I told myself. He valued his privacy. It wasn't a big deal. Then, about 2 months into the relationship, things started to get weird. I started noticing that he always seemed to know where I was. If I mentioned going to a particular grocery store, he'd casually mention that he'd been there earlier that day. If I posted a picture on Instagram from a local park, he'd text me saying he recognized the spot. It wasn't overtly creepy, but it was enough to make me uneasy. One night, I was working late at the office, and I received a text from Liam. "Thinking of you," it said. "Hope you're not working too hard." Normal enough, right? Except, I hadn't told him I was working late. I hadn't told anyone. I texted him back, asking how he knew I was at the office. He replied, "Just a lucky guess. I know you've been putting in extra hours lately." But his explanation didn't sit right with me. I started to feel like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of someone watching me from across the street, or see a car parked outside my apartment for hours. I couldn't be sure it was Liam, but the feeling of dread grew stronger every day. I confided in Sarah, telling her about my suspicions. She was concerned and urged me to break things off with him. "This is not normal," she said. "This is stalker behavior." But I hesitated. I still cared about Liam, despite my growing fears. I wanted to believe that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting. I decided to confront him. I invited him over to my apartment, intending to have an honest conversation about my concerns. He arrived with flowers and a bottle of wine, acting like nothing was wrong. We sat on the couch, and I tried to broach the subject gently. But as soon as I started talking about my unease, his demeanor changed. His eyes hardened, and his smile vanished. He became cold, distant, and menacing. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I stammered, trying to explain my feelings, but he cut me off. "You think I'm stalking you?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think I'm some kind of creep?" I didn't answer, terrified by his sudden transformation. He stood up and started pacing around the room, his anger building with each step. "I've been nothing but good to you," he said. "I've shown you things you've never seen before, and this is how you repay me." I tried to calm him down, but it was no use. He was spiraling out of control. He grabbed my phone from the coffee table and started scrolling through my contacts. "Who are you talking to?" he demanded. "Who are you telling about me?" I lunged for my phone, but he pushed me away, sending me sprawling onto the floor. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I knew I had to get out of there. I ran to the door, but he blocked my path. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. I screamed, hoping someone would hear me, but my apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the windows were closed. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "You're mine," he said. "You belong to me." I struggled against him, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the living room and threw me onto the couch. I don't want to go into detail about what happened next. It was a blur of fear, pain, and terror. I managed to fight him off eventually, scratching his face and kicking him in the groin. He stumbled back, giving me the chance to escape. I ran out of the apartment, screaming for help, and didn't stop running until I reached Sarah's house. I spent the night at her place, shaking and sobbing. The next morning, we went to the police and filed a report. The police took my statement seriously and launched an investigation. They discovered that Liam wasn't his real name. He had a long history of stalking and harassing women he met online. He had used several different aliases and had moved from state to avoid being caught. It turned out that he had been tracking my phone, hacking into my social media accounts, and installing cameras in my apartment. He knew everything about me, everything I did. The police eventually caught him, but the damage was done. I was traumatized, terrified, and felt completely violated. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and started therapy. It's been years since that night, but I still struggle with the memories. I have trust issues, anxiety, and a constant fear of being watched. I never went back on Tinder. I can't even think about online dating without feeling a wave of nausea. My experience with Liam taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of online anonymity and the importance of trusting your gut. It also showed me the resilience of the human spirit and the power of friendship. I'm still healing, still learning to trust again, but I'm determined to move on and reclaim my life. I refuse to let Liam define me or control my future. I will not let him win. I keep replaying it in my head, like rewinding a broken tape, trying to find the glitch, the moment everything went sideways. It's been almost a year, and I still can't fully grasp it. It all started, predictably, on Tinder. I was fresh out of a long-term relationship, feeling lost and a little reckless. Swiping felt like a harmless way to reclaim some control, to test the waters, even if I wasn't really looking for anything serious. His profile was intriguing. Not conventionally handsome, but interesting. A musician, or so he claimed. Moody black and white photos. A bio filled with cryptic lyrics and philosophical musings. He seemed different from the endless stream of gym selfies and generic pickup lines. I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. The initial conversations were intense. He didn't do small talk. He wanted to know my deepest fears, my hidden dreams, the moments that shaped me. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being truly seen, especially after feeling invisible for so long. He called me soulful and enigmatic. He said he felt a connection unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Looking back, it's easy to see the red flags waving, the manipulative tactics, but at the time, I was vulnerable, eager to believe in someone. We talked for weeks before finally meeting in person. He insisted on a secluded wine bar, tucked away on a side street I'd never noticed before. It was dimly lit, intimate, almost too perfect. He was even more captivating in person, intense, brooding, with eyes that seemed to see right through me. He talked about his music, his struggles, his artistic vision. I was completely drawn in. The first few dates were like that, deep conversations, intense gazes, a feeling of being completely understood. He showered me with compliments, told me I was unlike any woman he'd ever met. He even wrote me a song, a haunting melody with lyrics that seemed to capture my very essence. I was falling hard, maybe too fast, but I couldn't help myself. Then, the subtle shift started. He became more possessive, wanting to know where I was, who I was with, at all times. He'd text constantly, and if I didn't respond immediately, he'd get agitated, accusing me of ignoring him. He started criticizing my friends, saying they were superficial and didn't understand me. He wanted me all to himself. The music gigs he'd mentioned, they seemed to vanish. He was always working on something, but never actually performing. He became increasingly secretive, disappearing for hours without explanation, claiming he needed space to create. I started to feel uneasy, like the man I thought I knew was slipping away. One night, I decided to surprise him at his apartment. He'd always been vague about where he lived, but I'd managed to piece together the address from a few offhand comments. It was in a rundown part of town, a building with boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. I knocked on the door, and after a long pause, he finally opened it. He looked surprised, flustered, almost angry. The apartment was a mess, clothes scattered everywhere, empty bottles piled in the corner, a thick layer of dust on every surface. It was nothing like the artistic sanctuary he described. He tried to usher me out, claiming he was busy, but I pushed past him, wanting to see more. I wandered into the bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A wall covered in photos, not just any photos, but photos of me. Pictures taken from my social media, screenshots from our video calls, even photos I didn't remember taking. Some were recent, some were years old. They were arranged in a strange pattern, connected by lines drawn in red ink. I froze, paralyzed with fear. He tried to explain, stammering about how he was an artist, how he needed to capture my essence, how it was all for the song he was writing about me. But his words sounded hollow, desperate, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't just artistic expression. This was obsession. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, driving away as fast as I could. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media, and tried to erase him from my life. But he wouldn't let me go that easily. He started creating fake profiles, messaging me with different names, still using the same lines, the same compliments. He'd show up in places I frequented, just standing there, watching me. I felt like I was being hunted. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't physically harmed me, hadn't made any direct threats. They told me to get a restraining order, but I was terrified that would only escalate things, that it would push him over the edge. I started changing my routine, avoiding my favorite places, constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt trapped, like I was living in a horror movie. I became isolated, afraid to trust anyone, even my closest friends. The vibrant, confident woman I used to be had been replaced by a shadow, consumed by fear. One day, I received a package in the mail. It was a CD, unmarked, no return address. I knew who it was from. I hesitated, my hands shaking, before finally putting it in my computer. The song started playing, the haunting melody I'd once found so beautiful. But now, the lyrics were different. They were dark, twisted, filled with threats and promises of eternal devotion. Interspersed between the verses were recordings of my own voice, snippets from our conversations, taken out of context, distorted, used against me. The final verse was a direct message to me, a chilling declaration that he would never let me go, that we were destined to be together forever. I slammed the laptop shut, tears streaming down my face. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of his obsession. That's when I decided I had to leave. I packed a bag, emptied my bank account, and drove as far away as I could, without telling anyone where I was going. I changed my name, got a new phone number, and started a new life in a small town where no one knew me. It's been almost a year now, and I haven't heard from him. I'm still looking over my shoulder, still living in fear, but it's a little easier now. I'm slowly starting to rebuild my life, to reconnect with the woman I used to be. But the scars are still there, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface, of the dangers of trusting too easily, of the terrifying consequences of a simple swipe right on Tinder. I still can't even use Tinder without getting that sick feeling in my stomach. It's like he took something from me, the feeling of being able to trust anyone. Okay, so things were already messed up enough with Nathan, the Tinder guy who liked the sound of fear. Moving didn't magically erase the feeling of being watched, or the memory of that typed note. If anything, the anxiety burrowed deeper, settling into a constant hum beneath the surface of my life. I told myself it was PTSD, an overreaction, anything to avoid admitting that maybe, just maybe, he was still out there. I tried therapy meditation, even downloaded one of those white noise apps that promised to lull me into a peaceful sleep. Nothing worked. Months passed. I started a new job, made a few tentative friends, and even managed to convince myself that the worst was over. I started leaving the lights off in my apartment at night, stopped jumping at every creak in the floorboards. Maybe I was healing. Then, a few weeks shy of the 1-year anniversary of that awful date, I got a notification on my old, deactivated Tinder account. Just a glitch, I thought, something lingering in the app's code. I almost swiped it away without looking, but curiosity, that insidious little gremlin, got the better of me. It wasn't a message. It was a new match. The profile picture was a black screen. No name, no bio, just that unsettling void. My stomach dropped. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, who it was. He'd found me. Again. I immediately deleted the app, this time for good. I changed my phone number again, notified my building manager about the potential threat, and spent the next few days in a state of near paralysis. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a horror movie, waiting for the monster to jump out. A few days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, nestled in a bed of shredded newspaper, was a single, antique music box. It was beautiful, ornate, made of dark wood inlaid with mother-of-pearl. But it felt wrong, tainted, like a poisonous flower. I didn't touch it. I called the police, explained the situation, and they took the music box for evidence. They said they'd run fingerprints, trace the packaging, do everything they could. But deep down, I knew it was a dead end. Nathan was too smart, too careful. The police investigation stalled. No fingerprints, no traceable marks, nothing. The music box was just a pretty, unsettling object, with no clear connection to any crime. They returned it to me, advising me to keep it as evidence in case anything else happened. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It felt like getting rid of it would be an admission of defeat, a surrender to his twisted game. So, I locked it in a box in my closet, hoping to forget about it. Weeks turned into months. Life slowly began to return to normal. I started sleeping better, stopped jumping at shadows. I even started considering going on a date again, cautiously dipping my toes back into the dating pool. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while I was cleaning my apartment, I heard it. A faint, tinkling melody coming from my closet. My blood ran cold. I hadn't opened the closet since I locked the music box away. I stood frozen, listening to the eerie tune, the same melody playing over and over like a broken record. I cautiously opened the closet door, my heart pounding in my chest. The music box was sitting on top of the box, the lid open, the tiny ballerina spinning slowly. I slammed the door shut, backed away, and started to hyperventilate. How could it have gotten out? Had someone been in my apartment? I called the police again, frantic, desperate. They arrived quickly, searched the apartment thoroughly, but found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of anyone being there. They suggested I might have imagined it, that the stress was getting to me. I knew I wasn't imagining it. I knew he was getting closer, testing me, pushing me to the edge. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next creepy message or unsettling object. I needed to find him, to confront him, to end this nightmare once and for all. I started digging into his online history, scouring old social media accounts, forum posts, anything I could find. It was like chasing a ghost. He was careful, meticulous, leaving almost no trace. But then I found something. A comment on an obscure photography forum, a post about abandoned places, a picture of the train station from one of his Tinder photos. The poster's username was Nightol. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. I messaged the user, pretending to be interested in the location, asking for more details. To my surprise, Nightol responded. He was cagey at first, but after a few exchanges, he started to open up. He talked about his fascination with darkness, with the beauty of decay, with the secrets hidden in the shadows. I played along, feeding his ego, encouraging him to reveal more. Slowly, painstakingly, I started piecing together his identity. I found his real name, his address, his job. He lived in a small town a few hours away, worked as a night security guard at a local factory. It was a dead-end job, a lonely existence, perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. I knew I had to go there, to confront him, but I couldn't go alone. I reached out to a private investigator, a former police officer, someone who knew how to handle dangerous situations. He listened to my story, skeptical at first, but eventually convinced by my desperation. He agreed to help me, to accompany me to the town, to make sure I was safe. We drove there the next day, arriving in the late afternoon. The town was small, quiet, almost deserted. The factory was on the outskirts, a sprawling, dimly lit complex surrounded by a chain-link fence. We waited until nightfall, watching the factory from a distance. Around midnight, we saw him. Nathan. He was wearing his security guard uniform, patrolling the perimeter with a flashlight. We approached him cautiously, the private investigator leading the way. He recognized me immediately, his eyes widening in surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "I came to end this," I said, my voice trembling but firm. He smirked. "You can't end what's already started." He reached into his pocket, and the private investigator tackled him to the ground. There was a brief struggle, but Nathan was quickly subdued. The police arrived a few minutes later, sirens blaring. They took Nathan into custody, searched his apartment, and found a trove of disturbing items. Photos of me, surveillance equipment, and a collection of music boxes, each one more unsettling than the last. He confessed to everything. The Tinder profile, the note, the music box, the stalking. He said he was obsessed with me, that he wanted to control me, to break me. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and several other offenses. He's in prison now, serving a long sentence. But even though he's behind bars, I still can't shake the feeling that he's watching me. Every time I hear a faint melody, every time I see a shadow move, I'm reminded of him, of the terror he inflicted on me. The music box is locked away in a storage unit, but I still hear the tune sometimes, in my dreams. It's a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface, of the monsters that hide in plain sight. Tinder became more than just a dating app. It became a gateway to a nightmare I may never fully escape. And that still haunts my dreams. Okay, here goes. I don't even know where to start, to be honest. Just typing this out feels like scraping a wound that's barely healed, and I don't know if it ever will. It all started on Tinder, like so many of these stories do. I had just gotten out of a really long, toxic relationship, and I was trying to feel normal again. Everyone kept telling me to put myself out there, to reclaim my life. So begrudgingly, I downloaded Tinder. I wasn't expecting much. I swiped left on most profiles, the same old faces and the same old lines. Then I saw him. His name was Alex, and his pictures were different. Not in a bad way, just intriguing. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he had these intense eyes and a really thoughtful expression. His bio was simple, just a quote from a book I loved. So I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. We started talking, and it was easy. He was smart, funny, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything: books, movies, our families, our hopes and dreams. It felt like I had known him forever, even though it had only been a few days. After a week of talking nonstop, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, cozy cafe near my apartment. I was nervous, of course, but also excited. He seemed too good to be true. The date went perfectly. He was even better in person, warm, engaging, and genuinely kind. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There was this instant connection between us, a spark that I hadn't felt with anyone in years. We walked around the neighborhood after the cafe closed, not wanting the night to end. He kissed me goodnight at my doorstep, and it was perfect. After that, we were inseparable. We spent every weekend together, exploring the city, going to concerts, and just enjoying each other's company. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: supportive, understanding, and passionate. I fell hard, and I fell fast. He told me he felt the same way. He said I was different from anyone he had ever met, that I made him feel alive again. I wanted to believe him so badly. Looking back, there were red flags, subtle signs that I ignored because I was so caught up in the whirlwind romance. He was always a little secretive about his past. He would deflect questions about his family or his previous relationships. He also had a tendency to disappear for hours at a time without explanation, claiming he was busy or dealing with something. But I brushed it off. I told myself everyone has their secrets, their own issues to deal with. I didn't want to push him away by being too nosy or demanding. About 3 months into the relationship, things started to change. He became more distant, more withdrawn. He stopped calling as often, and when we did talk, he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. He also started becoming more possessive, more controlling. He would question me about where I was going, who I was with, and what I was doing. He didn't like me spending time with my friends, especially other guys. He said he was just worried about me, that he didn't want to lose me. But it felt like something more than just concern. It felt like he was trying to isolate me. One night, we were at his apartment watching a movie when his phone started ringing. He glanced at the caller ID and immediately silenced it. He wouldn't tell me who was calling, just said it was a wrong number. But I saw the name on the screen. It was a woman's name. I asked him about it, and he got defensive. He said I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust him. We got into a huge fight, the first real fight we had ever had. He stormed out of the apartment, leaving me alone and crying. He didn't call or text me for 3 days. I was a mess, convinced that I had ruined everything. Then, out of the blue, he showed up at my apartment with flowers and a tearful apology. He said he was sorry for overreacting, that he had been under a lot of stress lately. He swore that there was nothing going on with anyone else, that I was the only woman he loved. I wanted to believe him so badly. I forgave him, even though a part of me knew that something wasn't right. Things went back to normal for a while, but the unease never really went away. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. One afternoon, when he was at work, I decided to do something I knew I shouldn't do. I went through his phone. I know, it was a terrible invasion of privacy, but I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth. What I found shattered my world. There were dozens of messages and photos from other women he had been seeing throughout our entire relationship. Some of the messages were explicit, detailing their encounters. Others were just casual conversations, but they all painted the same picture. He was a liar, a cheater, a manipulator. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. I spent the rest of the day crying, trying to process what I had learned. I felt so stupid, so naive. How could I have been so blind? When he came home that evening, I confronted him. I showed him the messages, and he didn't deny anything. He just stood there, silently, his face devoid of emotion. He didn't apologize, didn't try to explain. He just looked at me with this cold, empty stare. That's when I realized that the man I had fallen in love with didn't exist. He was a fabrication, a carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate me. I told him to get out of my life and never come back. He left without saying a word. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. A few weeks later, I started getting strange phone calls, calls from unknown numbers that would hang up as soon as I answered. Then, I started getting emails and text messages, anonymous messages filled with insults and threats. They knew things about me, things that only Alex could have known. I changed my number, blocked the email addresses, and tried to ignore it, but the messages kept coming. They were relentless, escalating in intensity over time. They started targeting my friends and family, sending them messages and photos that were meant to embarrass and humiliate me. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without proof that Alex was behind it. I felt like I was being stalked, harassed, and tormented. I was living in a constant state of fear, afraid to leave my apartment, afraid to answer the phone. One night, I was walking home from work when I noticed someone following me. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each step. I started walking faster, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced back, and I saw him, Alex. He was standing in the shadows, watching me. I screamed and ran, desperate to get away from him. He didn't chase me, but he just stood there, smiling. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. I finally made it home, locked the door, and called the police. They came and took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or harmed me. I felt so helpless, so alone. I knew that he was trying to scare me, to control me, and he was succeeding. I started having panic attacks, nightmares, and flashbacks. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. I was a shell of my former self. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself, to reclaim my life. I decided to move, to leave everything behind, and start over somewhere new. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my closest friends. I just packed my bags and disappeared. It's been a few years since then, and I'm still struggling to heal. The scars are deep, and I don't know if they will ever fully fade. I'm still afraid of dating, afraid of trusting anyone again. Tinder, for me, will forever be associated with that feeling of complete and utter dread of the most terrifying time in my life. I'm sharing this because I need to get it off my chest, and maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else recognize the red flags, to trust their instincts, and to get out before it's too late. It's true that the internet has become a playground of catfishes and potential disasters, but just be careful and take the necessary precautions. I truly hope that nobody has to experience a Tinder date that ends up in a haunting memory like I did.